The conversation you're going to hear today was originally recorded on the Grit Performance podcast, and that is hosted by Tyson Maher. He is of Grit Performance, is his company. So similar to me in a lot of ways in that he's a remote coach as well as a gym owner. The gym's Grit Performance Center. They're in New South Wales, east coast of Australia. So if people are around there, be sure to check it out. He's a smart guy, definitely a good coach, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
It's a teen athlete who has like a realistic shot at the games, which is like insane. We've done some like different tests up to this point where we've redone different like quarterfinals and semifinals workouts, and he's put together like legitimate top like number one scores. Like he is insanely fit, and he's just like one of those people who, you know, like you get these athletes where it's almost like the what makes a good coach type thing, and you see some of the best athletes in the world. And you look at their coach and you're like, they must be a great coach because this athlete's so good, right? And It's like, this guy, like I've been only working with for like a couple of months, but he's like, it's one of those things where he does so many things right that have nothing to do with me. Like in terms of like his movement economy, like when he sort of like is having breaks between movements, he just stands there. He's just like stoic. He's like, no, like he's like wasting no energy, like just moves so well. He's like so receptive to things like, we'll be doing like movements, and if it's just like we're touching on like ring muscle ups, and it's like certain like aspects of that we're trying to improve, and it'll be like as simple as a cue or come and do this on the low rings, and then you jump back up and just do it. And then there's other people where it's like, man, this has been like a year process, and it's like so much of this stuff and his progression, I'm like, it's barely related to me, and it's like it's not one of those things that sort of skewed my perception, because I feel like I've always understood that, you know, the elite athletes are elite athletes, and sometimes it's not always a direct representation of the coach, but it's definitely like exaggerated that for me to the point where I'm like, man, this guy's going to be good no matter what.
Yeah. And also like, I think from the coaching side of things, you realize that like, okay, like this is the reason why just because you're an elite athlete doesn't make you like a great coach to other people who are trying to be elite athletes.
Yeah.
Because it's like the chances, the odds that you had to work really hard and scratch and claw to like work on refining your ring muscle ups is low.
Yeah.
Right. And you're probably going to have athletes who need to work on that. Right. And obviously like there's probably like differences where like if you're someone who is like a hyper responder like that, and you just like are going to get good at everything you do, or it seems that way at least, then like maybe that is a good fit. But obviously, like most people you work with are not like that.
Yeah, sure. Like Brody always says that one of the reasons that she enjoys coaching, like chest to bar, or like she's like great at chest to bar, and like one of the reasons that she enjoys it is it was one of those movements that took her so long to get, and so that she's like, you know, I just feel like I have such a good understanding of it because of the amount of time it took me to, you know, get a hold of that movement, and so passing that information on, and it's like it's one of those things where. It's almost like you're trying to like, so you feel more passionate about helping people solve a problem that was so tough for you. You know what I mean? Because it's like you almost empathize with the difficulty of that journey. So you're like more invested and like you, identify with like that problem. So it's definitely
that happens with like injuries too. Like, you know, I've had a bunch of like knee injuries. And so like if people have like an issue where like, okay, they need to be a better runner and they need to improve their squatting strength and they have knee pain, it's like that is very complicated. And I dealt with that like my entire career. So it's like there's not going to be a whole lot of people that are going to be able to help you better than I can. So it's like that kind of fires me up when we have, you know, obviously I don't want them to deal with stuff, but everybody does. And it's like it's a challenge, I guess. And that's like part of what makes coaching fun.
For sure. Problem solving, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys, and welcome to the next episode of the Grit Performance podcast. On today's show, we have Ben Wise from Zor Fitness, one of the great minds in the CrossFit coaching space, very analytical, very experienced, recently has decided to go all in on coaching, which I'm very grateful for, as he is the man that I've chosen to take care of all of my training, because I very much appreciate all of his insights and knowledge and everything that he has to offer. And today I've invited him on the show so we can go through quarterfinals and help you guys predict, prepare, and perform for what we can expect to see in the series of tests that are coming up. How are you feeling today, Ben? Or tonight?
I'm excited.
Whatever time.
Yeah, I want to jump in and talk about this stuff. That's what it's about.
Oh, yeah. So for the most part, I think anyone who does a little bit of research will have insight into the data surrounding quarterfinals and like what you can expect to see from previous years. I know, like myself, I spent some time over the last week just in the lead up to this scraping a lot of the data off the CrossFit website to sort of help me get, the crew best prepared, and also to get some insight into things that we can provide for here. Now, we know that most of the movements that we can expect to see are going to be, higher skill. They're going to be slightly heavier. They're going to be essentially a separator for the people who are looking to go from quarterfinals into semifinals, right? They're basically trying to cut the field primarily based on skill. The open, for the most part, has less bottlenecks and generally more of a test of fitness, whereas quarterfinals creates a lot more bottlenecks, so we can sort of trim the field down a little bit, get a more representative, a better representation of the more well-rounded athletes in the sport that are looking to progress towards semifinals. And the things that I sort of had jotted down, which were coming from the scraping of the CrossFit website, the things that we'll expect to see for the most part: high volume rope climbs, GHD sit-ups, pistol squats, heavy barbells, ring muscle ups, but more so in combinations that have higher levels of interference in comparison to the open, where it's generally sort of thrown at the end sometimes as just like a separator. It'll be a more core component. Bar muscle ups, but once again, under a lot more fatigue and interference. Handstand walking, strict handstand push-ups, and then overhead limited movements like dumbbell overhead lunges, heavy overhead squats. When you personally think about the movement selection that comes into play here, and you think about your client base and potential limiters that they have of those sort of listed movements, how are you allowing them to, one, still build upon the limiter that is there while still being prepared for the other tests in quarterfinals that may not be as much of a limiter for them, but be able to express, some of the strengths and other components of the tests?
Yeah. You're probably going to have to remind me of that in a second, because I'm going to go off on a tangent. Yeah. But I think one of the first things, like when I just look at the quarterfinals, because 2021 was the first year, we didn't have any last year in 2025. So we got 3 years of tests. And one of those years was Bosman, which I assume he's not programming this year. Mm-hmm. So it's like, really, you have an idea, because obviously there's certain constraints that they've chosen to put on it. And, the rough format of those tests was virtually the same, considering someone else programmed it. So it's probably not going to stray too far from that. Like, you're probably going to see at least 4, maybe 5, potentially 6 scores, likely 5 testing windows. And then it's you don't actually have that much data outside of that. I'm guessing Dave probably programmed, maybe with some collaboration with the team on the other 2. So it's again, you have an idea of what's coming, but I think one of the things that, if you've been around this long enough and you're someone who is analytical, it's you try to look for trends, you try to predict things. And if I know anything about Dave, it's that he likes to go out of bounds sometimes. Yeah. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind is okay, we always know that things are going to typically look like this. Yeah, until you don't. So I think
until they switch, yeah.
You can also go down the rabbit hole of okay, all the what ifs of okay, what if they do a handstand hold in the box? Because they've done that in the CrossFit Games team competition. They've done it on the first virtual stage of 2021 for the games. Very easy to standardize. NorCal did it last year in a qualifier. So it's very plausible that something like that could come up, but it's never shown up before. The likelihood of it showing up, probably not super high. So it's I guess that's what you got to think about as a coach is how much do I want to try to predict and like kind of broaden the exercise selection to like prepare for those what ifs versus how much do I want to just like focus on the stuff that are a little bit more known, that's like the likelihood of these showing up is very high, and then just trying to build fitness with those things. And not that it has to be either one of those, because I do a bit of both, and that's probably what I'd recommend to other people. But I think like maybe as that is like a starting place for like a mindset as you're like getting into program design for quarterfinals.
Definitely. It's like as a ratio, it's like how much do you want to play, be a betting man versus how much do you want to just ensure readiness for that athlete. Like
Correct.
An example
Yeah.
actually I could bring up was for Down Under this previous year. It's like all of the years leading up, there was this trend of like if there was rope climbs in the qualifier, there wasn't at the event. And if there wasn't rope climbs in the qualifier, there wasn't the event. And it's like this past year, it's like followed that pattern for like nearly like 5 years or whatever. And it come up, I'm like, definitely going to be rope climbs, doing lots of like rope climbs density, no rope climbs, right? So it's like one of those things where, you know, there is always those adjustments. On the last podcast, we referenced the barbell, like the semifinals, how they ended up switching it to be everything was a dumbbell, right?
Yes.
So it's once again, it's like you don't want to just like make all these assumptions to only fall, you know, to make someone feel underprepared, right? Because you don't want to convince them that, yeah, these are the tests that will be there, because then you're, you know, building that up in someone's head. And if it's not the case, then they feel underprepared versus it being, we are, you know, essentially still touching on all of the movements that we can expect to see at a higher level. Like, you know, realistically, maybe there's not going to be, you know, another massive chunk of light dumbbell snatches and, you know, things that we'll expect to see in the open. Like we can assume that the level of skill will go up a little bit, the weights will go up a little bit, and therefore maybe like touching on a ton of light barbell cycling and light dumbbell cycling isn't something that's going to be there. But at the same time, like I definitely appreciate that mindset where it's, you don't want to just entirely make an assumption off the data that we have based on the fact that it isn't, you know, a long, like 20 years of data that's like reasonably consistent. And, you know, like you said, there's variables in the person who has actually programmed for it as well. So I can definitely appreciate those insights. So when it comes to...
I also think like one more important thing to like bring to the conversation before it's even like, I think before you even like go into like, okay, what specifically do we need to be touching on for quarterfinals, this and that? It's like, I think the first thing is like, if you have a specific athlete in front of you, I mean, this is great if you're like writing like a blog program that's just going to go out to the masses. You don't know exactly who's doing it. It's like you're writing for sort of a demographic or an avatar. But if you got a specific person in front of you, like you do individual design, so do I, it's like, then it's like you sit down with the person, you're like, okay, what are our goals here for the quarterfinals? Like I got people who are going to do the open who are just going to choose not to do quarterfinals because they don't really care to go and try to do online semis, and the likelihood of them qualifying for an in-person event is relatively low. I've got other people that are like, okay, top 2,000 quarterfinals, like that's, you know, statistically speaking, you should be kind of a shoo-in. Like you should be okay. So it's like we just got to make sure we check these off and do it, but we're not peaking for that. We're maybe like a small peak, and we're just gonna try not to redo like 1,000 workouts when it comes time to do that. And it's like, so for some people, it's almost like a little bit more like the open, where it's like obviously you still want to perform well, but it's like not the highlight of your season. And then for other people, it's like it might not even be worth what doing. So it's like I think this in the initial starting place is like, where does this fall in like your priorities, and like is this something you want to do? And it's fine if it's not.
Yeah, definitely. Bucket those athletes, figure out, you know, essentially who's sitting where. Because for some people, I know like with certain people that I work with, I've had conversations around a similar thing where they're like, well, you know, I don't really care about quarters because I'm not going to make it to that next step, right? And the conversation that I have with them is generally, it doesn't always have to be perceived in that way, especially if there isn't anything in the immediate future that is important to that person. Like, let's just say, for example, there isn't like a qualifier for an in-person event that's maybe at like a intermediate RX level that they are fixated on. I like the idea of people utilizing quarterfinals just as a way to gather data for them to be able to reference and be able to, you know, I guess fine tune the trajectory of their program. And like for the most part, you sort of already understand where everyone's sort of strengths and weaknesses lie. But tests like quarterfinals and, you know, competitions create an environment where you are getting a good representation of that person's effort, because you can't generally always create like that qualifier competition level of intensity, so to have someone approach quarterfinals with that mindset at least allows them to go into it with some subjective wins, because it's like their potential intention for it. And like that's the case for myself, right? Like going into it, it's not going to be something where I'm like, oh yeah, like I am fixated on my result. Like, realistically, the numbers don't mean that much to me, but it would be good to sort of see where some limiters fall in that, some things that I'm like, cool, this is something that we can continue to work on here. But the actual result isn't something that's super tangible to me. It's more, what data do we gain from that to help with the individual design?
Yeah. When I think of like if I've got an athlete, typically if I'm trying to get comparison data, I either do it relative to their own abilities. So like test, retest on a very specific thing. And usually it's less sport related. Not that you couldn't run, okay, we did 20.1, let's retest it in 12 weeks after we've done a bunch of progressions, right? But again, that's one test. So it's like, whereas like oftentimes the benefit, in my opinion, for like test, retest scenarios for specific athletes is like around specific movements. So like for yourself, right? We did 50 or probably a 5-minute AMRAP as strict handstand push-ups in the fall sometime. We retested it several months later, just kind of when it was like made sense in training, and okay, we saw there was improvement. Great. Whereas like how much benefit would there be in you doing quarterfinals 2022 event 3, and we're just going to retest it in another 12 weeks. And it's like,
Yeah.
unless like those things are very specifically like weaknesses for you, and like there's a very makes sense that there's a reason for that. It's like, I don't know if that makes a ton of sense, versus like, okay, let's just get you signed up for something like quarterfinals of this year. We can know exactly where you fall relative to the field in this body of tests. And it's not going to mimic like a live competition in the sense of like competition hygiene and rhythms and travel and all of those stressors that are involved, but in the sense that it's condensed format, you're getting it's a very set number of tests that you have to do in a specific window. It's like a lot of those things are very specific, and that's going to give you great data points to look at. And again, it's something where the person's going to be much more motivated, even if they quote unquote like don't care about it as much, or it's not the highlight of their season or whatever. It's like their level of motivation, because they know that they're actually getting compared to other people and actually submitting their scores on a leaderboard, is just going to be way higher.
For sure. And it's, to an extent, you're helping the athlete get better at qualifiers as well. Because I know for a lot of the people that I work with, there is still qualifiers for these like intermediate RX and like elite level events, and quarterfinals.
So, got to make money.
Yeah, 100%. That's how it's
$20 a pop. All right, everybody get their online qualifier.
It's legit. That's like, it's when you're at a certain level when they're just doing like the qualifier, and then you see the event, you're like, man, I feel like majority of the funds are just coming from these qualifiers.
Yeah.
But like it helps, people get more prepared for circumstances like qualifiers, right? So people getting comfortable with setting up a camera and like having a little bit of that sort of competition tension surrounding a workout, how people can sort of properly warm up and prepare to sort of execute a workout well, compared to the workout always being at the end of your session and you're, quite like already like prepared and mobile. It's like coming in, doing a proper warm up and hitting it. So, there is that aspect of it as well to help, athletes get more exposure to qualifier scenarios. But I guess to sort of revert back to what we're saying with the movement specifics and the programming side of things. So when you think of individual design for someone, how are you delegating how much work someone's doing in isolation on a skill that you think could potentially show up, versus how much are you doing just putting it in integrated sort of sports settings in the lead up to something like quarterfinals? So just to give like an example, someone is, limited in their ability to do ring muscle ups. They have, a set of potentially like 3 to 5 unbroken, but they're in a workout setting. It's, not something that's a strength for them, right? So with that being the case, how are you, I guess, essentially giving them a little bit more exposure leading into quarterfinals to have that, are you sort of, look, let's expose it in more, higher interference type settings so that you feel prepared when it comes in, you haven't only done them in isolation and then doing them in a workout? Is it almost like we'll take a little step forward even though the normal sort of periodization of that movement wouldn't generally go that way, but just knowing that quarters is coming up?
Again, I feel like this is one of those where it can be very complicated until you have a specific person in front of you. Again, if I have somebody in front of me, they got 3 to 5 ring muscle ups, like, I'm wasting your time if I'm telling you you're making it to semifinals.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like, okay. And as soon as you like set like, okay, these are our expectations. Like, okay, we're still going to do the best we can in quarterfinals. You're not making it to semis, if I'm just being honest. Like, okay, we got a long trajectory to get there. We're working on things. We're making good progress, but we're not there just yet. Right? It's like, in that situation, it's like, hopefully we've been running ring muscle progressions for months. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, we've seen your technique is really cleaned up a lot. Like, okay, we still got little things that we can dial in here and there, but it's like, now it's consistent. So we can start to like mix in a little bit of fatigue. I'm making up a scenario, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, you can consistently hit doubles when you're fatigued in workouts. Okay, let's start to create scenarios that are giving you a little bit of fatigue so that when you go to do quarterfinals, I know it's not the highlight of your season. We're just using it as like a checkup, checkpoint to see how your training's going. It's like, but at the same time, I want you to be prepared so you can do it the best you can and that you also don't get injured when you're going through that process. So it's like, as me as a coach, like that's what like the priority is in my opinion then is like, let's make sure that you feel like you had a win when you go to do the workout and that you don't get injured doing the workout. And I'm not going to like say probably to the athlete, I don't want you to get injured when you're doing the workout. But as a coach, that's how I'm thinking about it, right? It's like I'm making sure my athlete, like, if they can continue to develop over the long term, like that's what's going to allow them to, just stay in the game. That's what allows you to get good progress over the long term. And it's like, obviously not getting injured is part of that. So it's like in that situation, it's like, yeah, probably just having a real conversation with them. It's like, what's realistic? And it's like, with the level that you're at, I don't see like mixing in a ton of fatigue all the time in training leading up to that being a recipe for success, right? The likelihood that you have incredible tolerance to that movement under various types of fatigues, if you got 3 to 5 consistently, is very low. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, let's just take it to the other extreme, right? You got somebody who it's like, okay, ring muscle ups blow me up in a workout, but I've unfatigued. I got a set of 22 in the tank.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, this is a very different situation. And now it's like, okay, we've identified that it's not the muscular endurance components of the ring muscle up that are usually the issue unless it's like really paired with something super aggressive. Like, okay, if it's a bench press, handstand walk, ring muscle up workout, yeah, you're going to deal with tricep fatigue. But, outside of like rare circumstances like that, muscle endurance is pretty good. Just a matter of like, it really spikes up your, the metabolic rate is hard to keep up with. It's like, okay, then we can do things where you're doing like ramping erg intervals into a set of ring muscle ups or even like into a shorter AMRAP that is like more sports like specific movements. And then that's going to be great training for that person, but they're just kind of in a different place than the other person. And again, that's not to like demean the other person by any means. It's just like part of like the coaching process is like setting realistic expectations as like what the person should be like what's the goal here? I don't know.
Yes. No, very much. And that's essentially bucketing those athletes again, right? And like for that first athlete, it's setting them up for some sort of subjective win, right? Like for them, if they've decided they want to do quarterfinals because their gym's doing quarterfinals, their friends are doing quarterfinals, right? It's like, all right, how do we go through this experience and have something tangible to leave with a win, right? And if that's how we executed a workout, sticking to a specific game plan, if it was, feeling like you were able to representatively show your capacity in each workout because you had a good pacing plan and a good preparation, and like you essentially leave quarterfinals being like, I'm happy with my execution. The result is irrelevant, right? That second athlete, maybe it's a little bit more tied on the actual execution. They know that they're not a shoe-in for something like semifinals, like it's not super realistic, but they've done quarterfinals previously, and they're this type of person that's like, even though realistically it never makes sense to compare yourself on the leaderboard because of the fluctuations, and it's a different set of tests and all that. And I explain that to people when they sort of go, oh, I want to try and beat my placement.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
They want to see it go up either way. They don't care if it's a different set of tests.
100%. And so, like for that person, it's going to be more so, once again, figuring out what that limiter is in the potential sort of workout pairings, potentially, having a little bit more exposure to those things, figuring out whether it is like, all right, we're going to do ring muscle ups, GHDs, ring muscle ups, like you said, bench press, like more horizontal pressing so we can, fatigue out that, the dip a little bit more and get exposure to that. And then I guess the third bucket that we didn't really touch on is the people that are essentially, shooting for something like a semifinals, right? Where they do have a realistic goal, right? Or a realistic shot at qualifying for something like in-person semifinals. And when that becomes the case, I think obviously there's a lot more to be said about more sport-specific contexts. If there is like, when we talk about limiters of people that are probably at that level, the limiter for them is still something that can be touched on like in an integrated setting, right? Like they can still do it under exposure, probably pairing that more so maybe once in a sport specific context and maybe one other time in the week in something that's a little bit more, has more constraints to sort of expose that limiter in an integrated setting. Is that a similar sort of thought process that you have for, say, that third bucket of athlete that has a realistic shot at semifinals, but they, still have a quote unquote limiter? Let's, for example, something like ring muscle ups.
Yeah, I think maybe a good example of that would be like, okay, if you're preparing an athlete for like a competition that just got coming up that's a live competition, it's like likely 3 weeks, 2 weeks, a month out, somewhere in there, they're going to get majority of their tests. It's like, so you're basically just running progressions of those events. It's like, if you only do super fatigued work of whatever movement you're doing, again, it's not really setting them up for success from health or like just like keeping that movement feeling really sharp. If you're always doing it under fatigue, whereas like, again, I think there are definitely people who do it the opposite way, where it's like they're always just doing a big rotating EMOM where they never really accumulate that much fatigue of any of like the specific patterns. And it's like, so I think what you're saying is probably a pretty good recipe where it's like, okay, obviously you got to get sport specific practice, and that doesn't always have to mean 5 rounds for time, but even if it is, again, somehow trying to create the internal metabolic environment that represents what they might feel like and kind of provokes whatever limiter they might deal with in a specific movement, and doing that in one situation, and then either doing like more isolated work where you might be getting a little bit more volume, or just like in a little more basic setting where it is like maybe an alternating EMOM or something like that. And then it's like maybe surrounded with like some supportive work. So like, for example, if it is somebody who is dealing with core fatigue, okay, you could give them a super specific pairing of, GHD ring muscle up or something, but you could also just do it where it's like maybe a little bit less of something that's maybe that's a bad example because you kind of want to do pretty targeted work with that. But say it's like handstand push-ups would be a great example, right? Like, so, if like quarterfinals was like the highlight of your season, it's like, okay, this is really important, and we're working on developing handstand push-ups. It's like we're going to hit on those probably at least once with fairly isolated, pretty dense work that maybe has some sort of like recovery erg or something associated with it to mimic it a little bit closer, but it's still like very isolated. Maybe another time in the week, and maybe then it would be also like, if you're closer to quarters, it would probably be like the accessories are also surrounding that time. So it's like you do that very specific piece, and then maybe it's like you do some Lou raises, you do some, banded flies, and some sort of like tricep specific thing, right? As like some accessories to be like kind of supportive to that. And then maybe on your second day, you get much more like specific work where it's like either, sets of work where it's like, you could just say it's like, okay, you got 3 minutes of work, minute and a half of rest, 5 sets of this. And one of like the primary movements is just a handstand push-up. And it's just like, maybe it doesn't even really matter all that much what the other movements are, provided that like goes well with the rest of the week. And just kind of like, again, it's not just like a random Metcon. It is like a little bit more specific, but it's still, it's still like it checks off what you need to, essentially.
Yeah. Essentially creating like an environment where you can maintain movement quality, maintain movement speed, like you said, which is super important. So it's like removing the total technical breakdown of that movement. So it's, as we've said before, it's like strength is trained at specific positions and velocities. And it's like, if you're trying to get better at handstand push-ups, and every time you do a handstand push-up, you're just like grinding through bananaing because you've set yourself up where you're essentially only doing them in these like high interference AMRAP for time type settings, then you're essentially training not only like poor movement economy, but you're training to be slow. You're training to be inefficient in that movement. So
that's why like I'm such a fan of intervals, right? Like you can't use intervals for everything, especially as you get closer to like sport specific stuff. And so like, and obviously like not everybody does a great job at translating ergs to CrossFit, as we know. So it's like, you got to get kind of creative, because it's an issue if the people aren't moving at the specific speeds they need to, and they just start to get into like super grindy reps and like weakness work. It's like, we don't want you chicken winging your bar muscle ups, kind of regardless of the situation. Like, we don't want you doing it. So it's like, okay, I gotta construct workouts where it challenges you, but not to the point where it breaks down that much. Or I gotta find some sort of like way to like language or writing the workout in a way where it's like, okay, if this shows up, this is what you need to do in order to like alter it. Or I just need to make sure like know the athlete well enough where I program it in a way that I know it's like, hey, do not chicken wing these reps. You're capable of doing it. Make sure you hold to this. So yeah, I think it's like finding a way to continue to push the athlete closer and closer to what they're actually going to see, which is just like Metcons, but then doing it in a way where, one, they're accumulating the volume that they need to in whatever movement it is, but then also doing it in a way that is not like orthopedically going to be a catastrophe or like, just like not like to speed that they need to perform it.
Yeah. And so like, I guess to sort of retouch on that.
Talk about that for like 3 more years if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's saying is, if you're terrible at ring muscle ups between now and quarters, just doing ring muscle ups every day. And like, I'm saying this not as a joke, like from literally like experiencing this sort of stuff in the affiliate. So like, I know that there's some of the people that are listening to this is applicable. It's like the skill acquisition is not going to be there if you're touching on this every single day. You have to still have restraints to be doing it intelligently. Like we said, minimizing that breakdown. And I know like you do a really good job, and we both use that sort of like AMRAP velocity loss, or like AMRAP minus, 1, 2, 3, whatever that may be, to sort of give people a gauge for sort of like reps in reserve, or just leaving comments around how the feel should be. I know with a lot of strict handstand push-up work, it's one of those things where you representatively want someone's unbroken set to be a set that they're able to maintain with like good torso position, the same sort of rep speed, and then they're breaking it up from there. Whereas I think it's not as digestible for people when all of a sudden their unbroken set that you've sort of allowed them to do becomes like a 3 or a 4, when it used to be like a 7 or an 8. But that 7th and 8th rep was just them, grinding into complete like high motor unit recruitment and just standing around for like 40 seconds. So that's a good framework for people to think of utilizing when they are like, all right, I've got to work more on my once again, bar muscle ups, strict handstand push-ups, ring muscle ups, is that you're doing them in a setting that allows you to maintain movement quality and maintain movement speed. And that has carryover when the workouts come around. Doing them in intervals alongside things that are, like more so like a movement pairing that you're trying to work on, but giving yourself adequate rest or recovery erg time, so you're still accumulating some level of aerobic volume alongside that. And just not always thinking that to progress, you need to push everything to essentially complete failure every time, right? It's not bodybuilding in that context where pushing to failure is the goal.
Yeah. I mean, you get compensation when you get really tired doing a movement. Mm-hmm. And it's like, at a certain point, you need strategies to be able to work around that, which is important. And it's necessary to compete at your best, because you will get to the very closest you can to failure and trying not to actually fail. Like, that's essentially the goal. Like, if you got like, shuttle run, max ring muscle up in an interval like I had at NorCal last year, it's like your goal is to know exactly when AMRAP -1 is. And if you get it wrong by 1, you're done. You're going to lose 6-8 places, just that, right? So it's like, you need to know where that is, but you can't train like that all the time. Like, you could probably train like that in non-sport movements, Again, you could give them some like bodybuilding protocols or something, and that would be totally appropriate. But like, you don't want to train burpees where your triceps are so blown up that they turn into 4 seconds a rep. If you're trying to be someone who wants to qualify for online semis, it's like you just don't want to do that. So it's like making sure that you're moving in the way that is actually like representative of what you're going to need. Like you're going to require yourself to do when you walk out on the floor or walk out into your gym for quarterfinals.
And this is one of those things like doing individual design. I know when people come from potentially of never working with a one-on-one coach, and some of the things that they get prescribed do look a lot more like intervals, or they do look a lot more like these sort of constraint settings. And it's once again, it's harder for people to digest because it doesn't look like the sport that they have signed up to and love competing in. And they just make the assumption that, I just thought I was going to get more specific Metcons, or that these things that you were going to write were just these like magic Metcons that all the pros do. Whereas, like I said, in reality, it's like you trying to create environments and restraints that are, testing and pushing, but allowing to, maintain speed and quality. Because especially in things like qualifier settings, movement speed and the ability to maintain quality movement speed is arguably the most important. Putting these sort of restraint settings where it is like the AMRAP -1, 2, 3, velocity loss, whatever sort of wording that you use, also helps people build athlete IQ, because they're learning to sort of auto-regulate. And it's like if they're only sort of ever working towards certain rep ranges and how they break those rep ranges, they're never actually fully gauging what it feels like to sort of push to those ends, recover, push to those ends and recover.
Yeah, like your program looks very different than somebody who is a much lower training age and athlete IQ than you. Like, I might not use velocity loss at all. I might not even use AMRAP minus whatever, because they might have no clue, right?
Yeah.
Like, AMRAP -2 front squat is AMRAP -1 front squat, like grossest thing you could possibly do. A lot of people don't know that because they've never really taken one to AMRAP -1. Or they think they did, right? But it was like, well, you probably could have grinded out another 4 or 5 there. So it's like, really, you had 5 left in the tank. And sometimes you write it and you know that for the athlete. It's like, I know they're going to be, this person tends to really undershoot what they're capable of. So it's like, I'll probably just write AMRAP -1. They'll probably get to AMRAP -3 or 4 in all practicality. And that's great, right? So it's just like, and also one more thing that we kind of touched on was like, this putting like a lot of constraints on something is great for like a lot of those movements that like as you're progressing somebody kind of through a trajectory of a ring muscle up, bar muscle up, handstand walk, handstand push up, a lot of those like higher skill gymnastics movements, like you got to find ways to like, again, make it where they're accumulating the volume, they're doing it in the right way, like all the stuff we mentioned before. But it's like, I'm very much a big fan of like not random Metcons, but like you need to keep a touch on the sport. And you can be very kind of like particular in how you go about it, making sure that you're hitting certain things that you want to make sure that, okay, this person specifically, it's like, okay, Tyson should probably do like some sort of like thruster chest to bar kind of couplet almost on a weekly basis, right? Because if you don't, it's just going to feel like absolute trash when you go back to it, right? And I know that because like that's kind of how I was. It's like, okay, I should probably touch on like thruster echo bike, like almost on like some sort of variation like that. That's crappy on a weekly basis almost. Where somebody else, it might be like, okay, we need like light power snatch, double under, toe to bar. Well, maybe not toe to bar. It's probably too low power output for a high power or a high level athlete. But it's like, okay, something along those lines, right? Where it's a little bit more like everybody's got their stuff. So you just sort of like bias exercise selection, like, okay, these are things that kind of make sense, or these are things we haven't touched in a while. This is kind of what makes sense in this person's week. And then, actually constructing sport pieces that make sense for them. So that's definitely part of it. I feel like we haven't touched on that yet, but
I was literally about to say
you got to do the sport. Yeah.
Yeah. You took the perfect transition, because that was exactly where I was going with the, how often essentially are you recommending that people go to the well, get a touch on the sport? Because that's, like you said, still a massive component of it. People still have to get a feel for the intensity, because it's like you don't want that to be something that they're not exposed to when these qualifiers, when quarterfinals and things like that come around. It's like it's all good and well to have the, I guess, the training essentially, right, to sort of set yourself up for success, as we've touched on, with curating these sort of environments to get the most out of the limiters that you have. But at the same time, you're still training for a sport, right? And you still have to execute in the sport, and the sport demands high intensity, you know, and a lot less, I guess, like structure than what we would expect to see in some of the intervals and stuff like that we provide. So with someone preparing, like once again, for say something like quarterfinals, is there circumstances where you're getting them to touch on multiple, I guess, settings of a higher intensity feel to sort of somewhat simulate what they're going to expect to see when they're doing quarterfinals, where there is multiple workouts in a day?
I think some of this kind of naturally comes along with like where an athlete's at in their overall trajectory. Meaning that like if you have a high level athlete, they're semifinals caliber athlete or above, it's like they're probably training twice a day. And it's like they're probably not just like, you know, doing OPEX map 10, you know, like super easy like planks and easy air bike and stuff like that, right? Like they're getting after it in both sessions. So it's like obviously you're going to vary it in how you do those things, but and with those such people, it's like you can give them touches of intensity throughout their week, and they're going to be just fine because they already have it. They've already been exposed to it. So it's like you could probably still keep in double sessions, give them some extra, you know, one or two of those end up being like more specific sport work, and the volume of their week might actually come down. Yeah. Whereas like, again, I would probably think of it almost like a bell curve. Maybe that's the wrong analogy, but like, you know, you got two ends of the spectrum, and it's like that's the one end. The other end is like somebody who's like does a lot of classes. They're pretty new to training, CrossFit specifically, and it's like they're still in the process of like getting a lot of their movements. They train once a day. It's like oftentimes like, you know, for these people and like the affiliate that I have, it's like they're doing like some individual design and they're getting into class. And class often has a Metcon in it. And it's like, that's great for those people because they haven't done a bunch of Metcons. Like if you've been doing CrossFit for 2 years, there's lots of combination and time domains and things that you have no idea how you perform. And it's like, that's really important for you to just get in and like, get into it and like know what to do. And because they're not so finely tuned, they can't just dig that deep where they're going to be completely trashed every time. And they probably don't have the fitness level that allows for them to just like really bury themselves on a everyday basis.
That's a great point, right? Because
and then like
say for example, there's a bottomless level. There's just something that is harder for them. They're not going to have the ability to push the intensity to the spectrum.
And it's almost like everything becomes harder if you're not as fit. Like even the most basic movements, you're going to desaturate on and like really have a hard time continuing to move with like consistency. So it's like for those people, it's like that's totally okay. They're going to be just fine to do that. And then it's like obviously like the high level people that are more than capable. They've got all the movements fairly dialed in and they've got little tweaks that they're making. But besides that, it's like just trying to push the physiology in the right way and then get them to like, you know, time up a peak and feel sharp at the right time. And then for everybody in the middle, it's like the odds of you actually making it through might be pretty slim. We kind of know that you're like, okay, maybe you're a bubble athlete. And it's like, okay, maybe this is like the crux of your season and we really do want to push it hard. But for a lot of people, it's like, okay, the reality of you going past online semis is very low. So let's continue to work on the stuff that you need to work on as we get closer to it. We'll make sure that you're ready for it so that you feel like you were saying before, like you collected a win, that you feel like you've seen objective improvement in things. But it's like, let's not derail training so far that it's like you don't need to just be like doing a Metcon every single day. I guess that's maybe where I would draw the line, right? It's like really high level athlete, if you're training twice a day, you might get a Metcon every day. Class goer, you might get a Metcon every day. A lot of people in the middle, probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. No, very, very, very much agree with all that. And it's like, I guess it's somewhat to do with the intensity, volume, curve as well, right? Like the people that are doing potentially just like the affiliate side of things, their volume's lower, so the intensity is relatively higher because of that, doing that metcon every day. But like you said, there is going to be a lot of bottlenecks and some things that just allow them to not sort of push that hard, that the recovery aspect of that metcon pushes them.
Honestly,
so
like I'm a great example of somebody who's kind of in the middle on that kind of thing, because it's like my engine was just not near needing to be for like, I was kind of out kicking my coverage, so to speak, on like where I was competing at with like the probably where my VO2 is, right? So it's like for somebody like me, I could like elicit VO2 max kind of stimulus with just like, the average class workout, and I could do that every day, and that would just be trash after a little bit. Whereas like there's again, probably on both ends of the spectrum, there's people who are like the movement proficiency isn't high enough for them, like the class goer, for them to like dig that deep. Like you were saying, like you're going to run into skill limitations, going to run into muscle endurance limitations. And then again, on the far side of it, it's like you have people who are so fit that they can just, Noah Olson's a great example, right? He's just moving at 100% movement speed the entire 8-minute AMRAP, and it never slows down because he's never at capacity. It's like, that's wild to think about. Most people have no idea what that's like. I don't, but it's like, if for those people, it's like, again, they're not potentially not going all the way up to like true, like physiological ceiling.
Yes. It's like you give, a higher level athlete a 20-minute AMRAP and they've hit the target volume within 8 minutes of that. Whereas that same 20-minute AMRAP, it's like someone else may not even get to the target of that volume. And the AMRAP itself was burpees, pull-ups, and wall walks or something. You know what I mean? So it's like maybe movements that they could keep going in, but it was just like the muscular endurance, the bottlenecks of those movements just meant that they were continually stopping that elite athletes able to essentially just maintain throughout that entire 20 minutes. And that's definitely the, some of the variables to consider when, thinking of individual program design.
Yeah. This is completely off topic, so I'll let you reroute after this, but it's like the whole like, the Rise of Machine things that's been all over YouTube. It's like, and everybody's got an opinion on it. It's like, for me, programming for our classes, it's like, if I want a super long piece, I have to be so careful about the movement selection just because of like, you don't want the power output to be so high that people are ruined 5 minutes into a 20-minute AMRAP, which is really easy to do. So it's like, obviously it's like way easier, less eccentric if you add in an erg. And it's like, there's other things that you could do to continue to do that, but it starts getting cheesy and people don't like it. Like I could give single unders and that would probably be appropriate. And that's probably just as hard, if not harder, than like a semifinal athlete doing double unders, but people don't want to like it. They don't want to do it. So it's just like, you got to get so creative sometimes. So like maybe like the chunking is like super small or something, right? It's like a 20.2 type feel where it's just like maybe like a bigger rotating and like more movements involved. So maybe it's like 6 movements and they're all like, you could do it in 15 or 20 seconds. And then you can take that 10-second transition. Most people feel like they're working the whole time. They're excited about it, but it's like, again, for those people, it's like not as much about sports performance because most of them don't compete. It's just like trying to get the stimulus out of it, which is universal.
Yes. And I love the conversations around like programming for an affiliate versus like individual design. And almost like when it comes to the affiliate side of programming, it's like you have an intent in mind and you're like, all right, now how do I make this enjoyable, like and digestible for the person, right? That like it's fun, because realistically it's like, you could just have them on machines and stuff like that, and then no one will come to your gym because they hate you. So it's like, so it's like trying to
skill work every day, and no one shows up. You're like, okay.
Yeah, so fair. Like I remember there was like a progression that we did that was like this like cyclical progression for Mikos, and it was like I did like a full like video around like, all right, this is why we're doing it, like trying to get everyone like super bored into it. And I was like, we're only going to do it once a fortnight and like all this sort of stuff. So it was like, and people did turn up to it, but I know it's like if that was something that you just did year round, people would hate it. So it's like, how do you create these environments to get a stimulus while still making things enjoyable and understanding, I guess, the bottlenecks that come with like varied levels of fitness. So
and I think for like maybe the majority of individual design clients probably also fit into that boat where it's like maybe not to the same degree, right? It's like, okay, they understand that there's certain things that just like suck it up and do it because you're a competitor and like that's what you're signing up to do, so just like do your work. But at the end of the day, like, I don't have anybody I coach right now that is like, they exclusively make their money off of sponsorship deals and prize money. Zero.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're in that bucket, it's like, it doesn't matter what you want to do. This is what you need to do. It's like, and maybe there's a little bit of a conversation of like, what do you think is important for you to work on? But even that is like geared around towards like, what's going to get you to your best performance. Because that's the only thing that matters. Because that's like what's putting money in your pocket. Whereas like people are paying to do this, right? They're paying to fly around. They're paying a coach to like write them stuff. So it's like they want to enjoy the process of doing it. And like part of that process is like being at your best when you go to compete. And like, obviously like you want to be at, do the best that you very can. And like, make sure that like you are showing up with like the best version of yourself. And part of that means doing the stuff that you don't always feel like doing.
Yeah, for sure.
And most people who are competitors understand that. And the few that don't probably don't actually maybe enjoy competing all that much. And maybe it's like something else that actually motivates them.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. And like that, I guess, like thought process I've carried across to a lot of people, because I think about people who sign up to quarters, and once again, it's not maybe a massive goal, but they still got their name on the leaderboard. So for the most part, it's like they still want to turn up, and like they're going to put weight on that, whether they say they will or not, right? So as a coach, you want to know like what are the things that you want to work on to create some buy-in so that they mentally feel prepared, because you want them to go into it confident, even if it's like, look, I know rope climbs aren't something that this person probably needs to work on a whole lot, but they think that that's the case. So we're going to make sure that they go in there feeling prepared, because it's going to help them have buy-in. They're still going, once again, name's going to go on the leaderboard. They're still going to put weight on it. You know, their reflection of the service is somewhat going to be representative of that. So I definitely always take that into consideration as well when piecing things together.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like super, like I love thinking about this, because it's like you have what you think the athlete needs to work on, which may or may not be what they think they need to work on.
Yeah.
And then you have like certain sport demands that you know they have to be ready for, which again, they may or may not want to work on. So it's like sometimes athletes come to me and they're like, hey, I want to work on GHDs. And you're like, well, I know the gym that you're going to go compete at because it's a local thing down the road. And it's like they have 2 GHDs. They're not doing – they have 8 lanes in this competition. They're not doing GHDs. It's like, we'll do GHDs. Right? Yeah. It's totally fine, right? Because it's just like, okay, we can mix those in, as part of training. It's not going to derail anything else. At the end of the day, it's your training, right? We'll do it. And like generally, like that's usually my stance when like people come to me with something specific they want to work on. Okay, we'll work on it. And oftentimes it'll kind of get phased out after like several weeks, maybe months, depending on how long. But it's like we'll run that for a while, and then it's like slowly I'll just kind of redirect it back to what I think is appropriate.
Yeah.
And again, if they bring it up again, maybe we'll mix it in. Maybe we'll keep it in long term. But there's, and maybe an example of that like hits home a little bit more is like me, right? When I was competing, I was like, I was talking to my coach Kyle, and I was like, Kyle, I know my back squat is way higher than my front squat. I want to back squat heavy because I feel good when I back squat heavy. He was like, all right, well, back squat. Like one of those things where it's like, I don't necessarily need this from like, if you were just like looking at my numbers or like my strength ratios or something, you wouldn't on paper think I need this. But it's like based on me and my history with myself and what I think I know, for whatever reason, I feel like I need this. It's like, okay, if that's the case, then like we'll add it in. Yeah. And then like, I guess the final layer of that is like, if you have an idea of like, okay, this is the athlete needs, then it's just a matter of like getting them to like either have buy-in or trying to get them to like admit that, okay, this is something that we need to work on without necessarily you even having to say it to their face. Yes. It's like, okay, Tyson, we had our 5 events at quarterfinals. Looking at this, what do you think our goal should be for? Well, it's like, okay, well, the ring muscle up handstand push-up one was my lowest finish here. That's where I accumulated the most points. So, and again, that's another great thing about quarterfinals is you have all these objective things to look at now. So it's like when you're doing a post-game analysis, you can look back and be like, okay, I don't have to tell you because you know, Like, you tell me, what do we need to be working on here? And there's like no way around it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that postcard. And then, like, I guess the contrast to that was, sometimes there's tests that expose something to that person because of the series of tests that wasn't a massive weakness, but it was just a weakness against that field. Like, we've had competition last year where there was like two running events or 3 running events in this like one weekend for like Down Under. So everyone finished it being like, I need to run heaps more. And I'm like, you're saying that because you ran 3 times, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it felt like that was something that was exposed, but relative to the field, you guys actually did fine. It was just the fact that it felt hard because you ran 3 times and things like that, right? So
I feel like that's the burpees after like every open. People are like, I need to work on my burpees.
Yeah.
Well, it's because you just went through the open and there was burpees in 6 out of the 5 tests.
Yeah. Yeah, and so people sort of like fixate on what is like immediately in front of them. And it happens week to week with the session. Someone will, have a poor session and there'll be a specific movement in that and they're like, oh, this just fell apart. I need to work on this. Like, one more. I'm like, all right. It's like, chill out. It's all right. It was just the session. It's okay. We can continue to move forward.
Yeah. There's also things like that, like that brings up such a good point. It's like that recency bias of like, okay, because I didn't do well on these specific series of events, one, I either need to prep for this specific combination, which is often not the case. Sometimes it is, but like more than often not. Versus, and then also like, is this more important than the open or quarterfinals workout last year that you bombed, that like we've seen marginal improvement in those things, but like not a lot, where it's like still not a weakness. So it's like combined with like everybody based on their anthropometrics is going to have certain movements that they're just not as good at. They're just going to be predisposed to not being like great at. Again, the amount of wall balls that you need to do in your program versus the amount of wall balls I need to do in my program is vastly different.
Yeah.
Like I could do wall balls until I'm blue in my face, and when they come out, I'm gonna like hope to squeak by with an acceptable score. And so like that is something that like that's something that I know that based on all of the past experiences I have. If I get lucky in I'm not doing quarterfinals, but if they had wall balls in them, or let's say they didn't have wall balls in them, and like there was something else that I identified as an issue, it's like, okay, you could work on that, but don't neglect the fact that like this is something that needs to be a long-term developmental thing that needs to stay in there constantly. So again, this is something that I talk about this maybe a little bit with the athlete face-to-face, but it's more just something that I'm going to keep notes on the back end of that person's design as like what we need to be working on. And they're not going to go away just because we have recency bias to something else. It's like, just because you got exposed on a handstand hold that is going to come out in 1 out of 100 qualifiers doesn't mean that we're just going to work on it constantly. Right.
Yeah.
Because your handstand push-ups that are going to come out in 80% of qualifiers are more of an issue, and like that is the thing that like we need to continue to work on. So 100%. It's just like that, and maybe not all coaches are like this. Maybe other coaches get like really like more emotional about performances around certain things, but I guess for me it's like I try not to get too attached to one particular score. It's like, okay, there's so many factors that can go into one thing. It's like just look for trends and like kind of trust your gut as to like what an individual athlete's going to need.
Yeah, for sure. It's like figuring out what the biggest needle movers are, not allowing recency bias to sort of skew that perception.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Because it's like, once again, it's like when you sort of zoom out and look over the year, it's like, how am I going to help this individual achieve the most success across the greatest like timeline in which I work with that person? And it's like, yeah, we could fixate on improving this this issue that is like, burnt into their head from this recent event, or I could set them up for success to, improve over the next 3-4 things that they have associated importance to the point where they just forget that ever happened. Set them up.
Yeah, and also I'm not saying it's wrong to like,
no, 100%.
If somebody get exposed to not like, they're probably very motivated to work on whatever that is after that, because they, if it's an in-person event, they could feel like they got embarrassed doing it. Like you couldn't climb the pegboard at the CrossFit Games, you're probably very embarrassed. your legless rope climbs went so poorly in the competition that you're the only one standing on the floor and everybody else was done. It's like those things really get burnt into your mind as an athlete. So like leveraging that to like continue to work on that when it gets very boring, and because you've been doing this, you know, the same types of progressions for a very long time is super valuable.
Podcast, that was the legless roll time experience for her.
Oh no.
Semi-finals, she's definitely come a long way since then. But that example is 100% the case, right? Like you just built this like it's a bit of trauma surrounding like a certain experience, and it's like as a coach, it's like there is potential to ride that wave. The buy-in is going to be so high that it's like, you know, you're basically certain that there's buy-in and they're going to make improvement on that. And it's once again, it's just how much of the program are you delegating, or how much of their, you know, adaptation currency, their energy are you putting into that thing? It's like, yeah, it probably makes sense to put some in there because the buy-in is going to be so high. But it's like, do you want to shift the entire trajectory of that program for that reason? Maybe there is some circumstances where it is the case, like you said, because maybe it shows up again in some other competition in 4 weeks. But then there's other circumstances where it may not be the case.
Yeah, and you know, obviously there can be stuff where it is like, this is so significant that it's probably going to alter the way that we do training for a long time. And maybe it's not like specific to even like a leaderboard performance. It could be like an injury too. Like someone pulls a heavy deadlift, they hear a pop in their back, and they're down for like 3 days, like crawling around, like literally. 3 weeks later, they're like walking around just fine, able to move, no issues. It's like that person could deal with like the residual like mental trauma from that for the rest of their career. And it's like if there's certain things that like you could do that like might keep them feeling confident in their ability to do that, then it's like you should do those things and you should do them until they retire. Yeah. So there are things that are definitely like that. And there could definitely be performance things too. Like I see somebody who's got long legs. It's like we're going to squat twice a week as a starting place, and you're going to do that until you retire. Yeah. That's kind of a non-negotiable. So
yeah,
I think it just kind of depends what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole podcast in itself, nearly. But
yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist, so
yeah, no. Classic. I guess the last point to make, right? And then because we've been talking for an hour, so we'll sort of can utilize this to sort of bring it home. So we'll give ourselves like a bit of an avatar, so it becomes easier to sort of work with. But when it comes to performing in the CrossFit Quarterfinals, what are the things that you would give your athletes as tools leading into those workouts? They're the sort of person who's essentially doing it because they've qualified. They're doing it because, once again, their friends are doing it, the gym's doing it, they want to do it, and they just love doing CrossFit orientated stuff, right? They're like, all right, this is some good qualifier practice. We're not going to, like, they care about their score because they've put their name on the leaderboard, but they don't care if they don't make it to semifinals because the expectation isn't there. Right? They're just doing it for the sake of doing it. When the weekend comes up, what are the sorts of things that you're giving them to essentially best prepare for that? And if that's, you know, what does a framework for strategy look like? What does a framework for, and once again, can be short and sweet because these could be, you know, once again, long tangents as well, but just sort of preparing for each of the workouts as they come up.
Yeah, I think it starts like if that person, again, I think it starts with setting expectations as to like what is the goal, right? The goal is to enjoy the experience, to have a positive experience by doing the best that you can, and not just like redoing workouts until you're blue in the face. Like setting some of those like boundaries up front of like, okay, maybe we redo 1 or 2 of these workouts if you think like I'm really not happy with how this went and it's going to stick with me long term unless I want to like redo it. It's like, okay, let's redo it. But like just setting some expectations around like what do you how committed are you to your best scores? And then it's like based on if they're really committed to having some of their best scores, then it's like even if you're not like going to qualify for the next thing, you're fairly committed to being at your best. So it's like we'll probably do a little bit more specific prep then for them. And then it's like, because you had a little more specific prep, we can probably talk through more scenarios that have been very similar to what you're doing in a quarterfinals test that actually comes out just based on your past training. And you would do that even if you didn't really do a ton of specific prep for the person. It's like, all right, Tyson, we did this handstand push-up, ring muscle up, shuttle run workout from 6 weeks ago. This is a very similar type triplet here. The work to rest isn't that much different. The volume's roughly the same. So let's use this as sort of like our pacing strategy or something, right? So you're trying to pull up past examples of like, this is a time that you had success and this is how you paced it. This is a similar type of environment. So it's like just allowing that person to call on past experiences to build some confidence in what they're doing. Because it's like, oh yeah, I have done this combination before. You're right, coach. I haven't thought about that workout before. So it just gives them a bit of, hopefully like a baseline level of confidence when they're going into the workout. And obviously that helps them with pacing and forming pacing strategies.
Yes.
And then obviously like on the back end for like our company and stuff, we're going to have like all the warm-ups built out for them. We're going to have some pacing structures of like different ideas. And then usually like I just try to like either send athletes a voice memo if a bunch of athletes doing it, or I'll jump on a quick call with them or something and kind of talk through. It's just like, what are we thinking for this? And it's just, there's no like real formal structure for that process. It's just kind of based on my experiences with that person and like what I think that they're capable of. And then at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to like, I can't tell you when to break, right? If we're trying to form pacing strategies, it's like, I have an idea of what your capacity is here, but I can't tell you if you should do 2 more reps when you're out on the floor. So it's like, It is your job to know that like I am in charge of this. And I'm like putting the ownership into their hands. It's like I'm setting you up the best I possibly know how for you to be at your very best when you walk out there. But you're on your own once you're out there. Like I'm going to be there to support you. I can help, in whatever way I'm able to assist. But it's like you are the only one who knows internally what's going on. So you're in charge of your performance. And again, I think maybe that comes across as blunt, but it's like that's just honest. It's like this is something that if you just need to know. And I think oftentimes, like if athletes take that level of ownership, things tend to go better. Not always, but oftentimes. And then it's just like making sure that I again, one of the resources I would send out to people is just like a checklist for qualifiers to make sure that they've got all their boxes checked off. And this is what starts before they even get the workouts, right? So it's like hopefully they get it the week before. I would say this is great. Earlier in the week before they get announced, where it's like, okay, I'm lining up time slots for judging. I'm making sure I got my nutrition. I got my gummy bears and my fruit snacks and my Gatorade powder and all the carbs in the world and whatever else, right? Like just like stuff they need for fueling. Again, when the workouts come out, these are kind of my steps that I'm going through in terms of like printing scorecards, giving to my judges, asking how I want to be communicated with when I'm out there. There's a lot of just like very boring logistic stuff that takes so much stress off the athlete and then allows them to just go out and perform it.
To focus, yeah, for sure. And like that framework in which you put up then in terms of taking ownership, that's one of those things where the training that we sort of spoke on and curating those intervals and helping build athlete IQ, it's like it pays its dividends so much in those environments because you yourself have built a relationship with your relationship to failure for specific movements, but also, a relationship with like what it feels like to, be more, intentful and aware of your movement in workouts. Like you're not just going into everything with the goal of being like this number. It's like there's strategy to your training, and then that carries over when you're actually executing in competition or in qualifiers and stuff like that as well. And it's like not everything's just looked at as like a hit the go button and go as hard as I can until the wheels fall off.
Yeah. And I think like usually the athletes who are most analytical, where they're going to like really nitpick their strategy for workouts, are also probably the athletes who leave pretty detailed notes, and you probably know their break strategies for previous workouts they did based on just like their feedback that you give them. So it's like just as simple as like digging up a past workout that had similar exercise selection, looking at their notes, talking with them about it. Again, they're probably already going to know if they're an athlete who's performing at a decently high level. And if they are someone who's going to want to like over analyze in terms of like creating a strategy, like, okay, like at least we'll have some data for that. Then like you got other people who are just like, I think I'm going to be pretty capable of this. And they just kind of go into it a little bit more willy nilly. And it's like, I've coached those athletes. I was never that way, so it's a little bit harder for me to like kind of relate to, but it's something that I've kind of learned that like I can't force like a super detailed strategy onto someone who's not a super critical thinker about exercise in the way that I am. So it's like a matter of giving them like a few landmarks or guide rails as to like, okay, when you get into it, you just got to make sure you're not redlined when you're getting on the rower. I think somewhere around this calories per hour pace is going to be about right for you. But again, the big thing is when you get off the rower that you can walk right over to the rings and get right to work on those. It's like, even if they're not a super analytical thinker, they know what that means.
Yes. Because you're just giving too much cognitive load to the athlete otherwise, right? Like some people can sort of process it, whereas other people, it's like, it's almost going to have a negative impact on their performance because their cognitive load's going to be so high thinking of all of the things that you've given them to break down. Whereas for other people, that's almost just a part of their process. And I guess as a coach, it's really just distinguishing the difference in personality types to sort of set them up for success. So yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
But it was a solid episode, man. It's like an hour and 10. So I respect your time.
That was so quick.
Yeah. I was like, as much as I'd, love to just keep sitting here talking because there's a million different things we could go through. Like I said, this was sort of like a timely one, but I've got so many like different conversations that I'd be super excited to have. So maybe there'll be something that was a little bit less restrained in terms of just talking about quarterfinals, and we can just go off on tangents and stuff like that in the future. I think that'd be cool.
I'm down to talk whenever.